Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming this evening. I'll give everyone a moment to get settled. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Elle Baker. I'm the Open Space and Environmental Planner for the City of Revere. We're here to talk about a project that we've been working on that's been supported through MVP funding. It's the Coastal Vulnerability Assessment Regional Adaptation Plan. It is a regional project that has involved Revere as a lead community, Saugus, Lynn, Everett, and Malden as well as a multitude of state agencies. I'd like to just recognize that Mayor Keefe is here joining us tonight. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your ongoing support of the project. I'd like to just take a moment and introduce some of the members of the project team that have been working together. As I said, this is an MVP-funded grant. The initial grant that brought this team together was through Accelerating Climate Resiliency Grant through MAPC. We formed the group in 2021 into 22, and then starting in 22, we kicked off an MVP grant to talk more about what we can do as a region. And basically what we've done from the start is join the 5 communities together, also with state agencies, including Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We've had the Office of CZM, Coastal Zone Management. We've had the Army Corps of Engineers involved, MBTA, DCR, EPA, Mass Bay. So we've had a multitude of environmental agencies that have joined us along the way, which has been very exciting and helpful to guide us in our plight. I know that a lot of people here are interested in what are we going to do for flood protection or flood risk reduction. So we're looking at this in the lens of this project through a regional scope. So our first round in this past year, what we've done is, as a team and all municipalities involved, have taken a look at the critical infrastructure, pump stations, roadways, et cetera, which you'll hear more about as we get through the presentation. But, so not only taking that approach, but looking at that through the EMS to FRM modeling, which Connor will also talk more about, which is basically a model to base the predictions of the future on past storm events that we've experienced. So I'll let Connor tell more of the details of that. He's more familiar. So as I said, I'm Elle Baker. I'm the project lead for this. We also have Mary Lester here from the Saugus River Watershed Council. She's been a great supporter of the project. We have Connor Often and Justine Rooney from Woods Hole Group. They're the consultants that have been leading the project along the way. We have Lexi Neffinger, sorry, from CZM. She's been joining us and helping us with a lot of the outreach so that we're able to offer translation for languages that are requested. So tonight we're going to offer Arabic translation as well as Spanish translation. So if anybody is interested in that, if you haven't sorted that out, please either see Asma or right over here. I'm sorry. Wanda. Thank you. It's nice to meet you tonight. And Daria Matis is here. Where are you? There you are. I don't have my glasses on, so forgive me. And Daria is from our North Suffolk Office of Resiliency and Sustainability. It's a new office that's been established by the communities of Revere, Winthrop, and Chelsea to work together to take a regional approach to resiliency and sustainability. So she's joining us on this project team. And we've also had a number of other folks here. Mass DOT as well has been involved in this project. So without further ado, we're going to try our best to keep things on track so that we can get everybody out of here at a reasonable time. Again, I thank you for your time tonight. I know it's your evening and this is your downtime, so we appreciate you being here and providing feedback and having a voice through this process. So, Connor? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Elle.
I'm going to go this way.
Of course. Hi everyone, my name is Connor Ofston. I'm a coastal scientist with Woods Hole Group, and I work on coastal planning, sea level rise planning, coastal processes, modeling, and analysis. And so what we're going to do today is talk through the Saugus River watershed region and its vulnerability to coastal storms, both present day and into the future with sea level rise. So our agenda, I'll go through just a little bit of the introductions, what our project is about, what sea level rise science is saying today, and how we are planning for it. We're going to talk about risk assessments and flood risk specifically, coastal storm flood risks. So we have flood maps here depicting 2030 and 2070, sorry, blanked there for a second, 100-year storm flood extents. And we'll take a breakout session in about 15 minutes, and we can all come up and put stickers on the maps where we've personally seen flooding. And we have note cards as well if you have any stories to relate to us. Then we will reconvene with the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about our results of our analysis so far, looking at critical infrastructure in the town, in all 5 towns of the community. And then we will return to a breakout session for adaptation discussions, whether you're interested in adapting your homes on an individual basis or looking regionally. We have different tables on different subjects, and the group here, the project team, will be leading those. So then we will finally come back to talking about schedule, and then we'll go through questions. We hope to wrap up by 7:30, but if questions continue on, we can stay here as long as you'd like to talk through those. What's pictured up here, a little bit small, but you can see there's 3 images here. One on the back is a flood damage reduction report. That's a cover letter from an Army Corps study in 1990. And that might ring a bell for some of you who have been here for a long time. There was a lot of planning after the 78 blizzard of 78, when the Army Corps began looking into flood damage reduction opportunities. One of those was a storm surge barrier. Others were seawall enhancements along Revere Beach. And that work was really building in momentum until 1990, when unfortunately it kind of fluttered out, and Elle can talk more about the history of that. And now we are here, 2023, looking at this flood map here that's pictured there, at even greater risk, with unfortunately not the large regional scale action that is necessary to protect all of these communities. So that's really the motivation for this project and why we're here today, and looking for your input. Sea level rise projections are, we have them for the state of Massachusetts, and we have them for North Shore and South Shore, being south of Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and the islands, because sea level rise is a result of climate change and global sea level rising because of ice sheets melting and water expanding due to increasing temperatures in the atmosphere. Those variables contribute to slowly elevating waters, which we've seen slowly increasing over the past 100 years. There's a dotted line here on the left side of that figure that's trending upwards incrementally. And that is our history of sea level rise. So back in 1910, the Saugus River watershed area might have seen water levels at about a foot less than they do today. Today we are standing there at the 0 line. And then in the future, there are 4 different projections going up, and those show different water levels that we could see. This is changes in mean sea level, equivalent to changes in high tide or low tide. This is just the baseline water level of the ocean. All storms or waves on top of that will be only an added influence for coastal risk. So by 2030, the projections that Massachusetts is looking for us to plan to are 1.3 feet of sea level rise. By 2050, it's 2.5 feet of sea level rise. And by 2070, it's 4.3 feet of sea level rise. And those numbers are accelerating, and that's what our climate models are saying. We are using the best available science. We're not developing the climate models ourselves. And we are following a high projection, so this is kind of a conservative assessment of sea level rise for planning purposes. There's a low probability that we would exceed the high curve here. So by planning for sea level rise 1.3 feet by 2030 or 2.5 by 2050, we are covering our bases, and we're prepared for most situations. With this sea level rise projections, we have a model that we've prepared. It's a coastal storm risk model, and it models dynamics of nor'easters or tropical storms and how those play out across the landscape. How the storm surge is blown in from offshore and it runs up the Saugus River through the Pines River, how waves attack Revere Beach. And we have been able to map the probability of flooding in all areas in this region with that model. So we use that flood risk model to overlay with the region and the buildings and the populations and especially the critical infrastructure. So we're using that to identify what critical infrastructure is at risk today and what might be at risk in the future. I'm going to walk through that shortly. First, I just want to take a look at one of the flood risk maps. This is, we call it a rainbow map because the legend on the top left there spans the spectrum of the rainbow. The darkest blue color is the 100% flooding, annual flood chance projection. That's equivalent to a one-year storm. So you can expect that to happen once per year. Moving up the spectrum, we go to lighter blues and purples. In the purple is a 10% annual chance event, and that means you could expect that storm to happen once every 10 years. And then further up to the yellows and the greens, green is a 1% chance, that is a 100-year storm. And then we have modeled all the way up to a 1,000-year storm, which would be occurring likely once every 1,000 years. So very low probability, but we are planning for worst case scenarios here. For the present day, this is a present day flood risk map, there is extreme vulnerability in this region. As you may well know, you might have all experienced flooding, which might be the motivation for you being here today. Point of Pines and Revere Beach and Riverside in Revere are one area that are extremely vulnerable. You can see that the sand spit that all the development is built upon is flooded under certainly the 100-year storm, and in some cases even less severe storms. Moving clockwise around the image, there's Revere Street. Revere Street is a low point in the city of Revere, and overtopping of Revere Street then spills out into other areas towards Wonderland MBTA Park. That is a pink polygon there. You can see down by Revere Street, and that's the 1,000-year storm. So we might not have seen that yet today, but it could happen under a very, very extreme storm. Moving around the page, there's Town Line Brook and Linden Brook. Those areas are further complicated by stormwater issues. You might have recognized tide flaps, tide gates, managing the water from from precipitation that flows into the Saugus River, and the Pines River, in this case. And then there's also the risk of coastal storms overtopping Route 1 and starting to flood that watershed. Bristow Street in Saugus is another critically vulnerable area. That's a very low neighborhood there, down Bristow Street and adjacent streets, all the way to Ballard Street in Saugus. So right now that's depicting about a 5-year storm, is that light blue color, is anticipated to flood the area. We do have flood depth data that is supplementing this. So right now I'm showing you just the flood extent. We do have flood depth data, and so in these cases, the flood depth may not be very high, might be 6 inches. But with sea level rise, the flood depths are only anticipated to get more extreme. In the Lynn area, there are 2 primary flood pathways. One is Strawberry Brook at the top of the page there. And then the last is by the Edic Pier, where, what is the name of that boat ramp there? I'm blanking on that. There's a Lynn boat ramp that is a low point in the town and represents one area that flooding might be entering. So, what's that?
It's on Blossom Street.
Blossom Street. Thank you, Blossom Street. What's that? Blossom Street Extension. Yeah, where the ferry goes. Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do is take this time, 6:25, that's good time, to break out into these 2 posters here. And so I want, if anyone here has experienced flooding, or if you haven't, we have different categories for stickers. We have, do I live or work in certain areas? Place a green sticker where you live, where you work. If you know folks who couldn't make it to this meeting, feel free to put them on the board as well. Places that you visit regularly. We're trying to get, this is qualitative. We don't have a large sample size here, but it really helps give us a sense as to what areas are people concerned about, what areas do people tend to visit. And then lastly, the red stickers are areas that you've seen flooding. This could be precipitation-based flooding or storm surge-based flooding. I know it can be hard to tell when you're out there on your own. So we have note cards as well, if you would like to provide a little bit of a write-up to describe what you have seen. So I'm going to stop talking here and invite people up, please don't be shy, to put your stickers on the board, represent where you live. All right, we'll take one more minute, and we'll come back together, if that's okay. How done? Good.
I have one here. I don't know where everyone's
Oh, great.
putting them.
I'll make an announcement. Yeah, of course. You live and work here. All right, that was productive. Honestly, thank you so much for all that input. And a few things are sticking out. Point of Pines, Riverside, especially. So it seems like we've got a lot of folks who live and work down there, and have had a lot of issues, especially December 23rd. We've got a lot of pictures from those, and some people are going to send. If you have photos and videos of flooding that you've seen, the more the merrier. My email will be at the end of the presentation. You're please encouraged to send those along. We did get one comment card describing what somebody experienced, and we've got one more coming. So I'm going to put these up here, up front, if you want to add them to the pile.
So if you haven't filled out a comment card about the flooding that you've observed or experienced, please try to do so before you leave, because it's really important that we're able to capture that. We really want to have all the information. We want to hear from you, but we don't want to just share information. We want to actually hear information back. So that really helps to guide us with what we're looking at and what residents are actually experiencing on a regular basis, or on that in a storm situation scenario. So being able to hear from you is really, really important, and will all be documented and wrapped into the project write-up at the end, so it won't be lost, is what I'm saying. So please don't hesitate if you haven't, or you want to fill out a second card or a third card because you've observed it somewhere and you live somewhere and you're experiencing it. We all know under current conditions that we are experiencing it more regularly. So the more that we can document that, the better off that we are moving forward, and it helps us to advance plans. So just please don't miss out on this opportunity to share your experience.
All right, what I'm going to talk through now is a little bit of our risk assessment and some of the top findings of what's at risk. And then we will talk about adaptation and how to prepare for this flood risk. So critical infrastructure is the main focus of the quantitative vulnerability assessment. So we went out and surveyed throughout the town critical infrastructure, and specifically the critical elevations where this infrastructure might become damaged or inoperable due to flooding. So we looked at elevations of roadways, and we looked at elevations front entranceways to pump stations, or manhole drains that can't be, not manhole drains, the wet wells for pump stations and when those might be overtopped. So we took the critical elevations and we crossed those with the flood risk elevations. So 1 year storm might be 9-foot flood tide, and a 10-year storm might be a 12-foot flood tide. And so whenever that critical threshold is met, then that asset is deemed vulnerable, and we start to evaluate it. So we looked at roadways, public transit, pedestrian ways, specifically the bike route through town, the pump stations, police and fire stations, schools, and other pieces of critical infrastructure from state assembled data. The consequences of flooding of this critical infrastructure varies. So some infrastructure supports an entire town or even a region. Some of it is specific to a neighborhood or even a property. So we are not just evaluating what the probability of something is to be flooded, but how severe it is if that asset is flooded. Does it knock that asset out of function for a day or over a month? Does it cost a couple $100s to fix it? Does it cost a couple $1 million to fix it? Is it a threat to public safety or economic activity? Is there a chance that flooding of an asset could cause a spill and increase contamination and environmental risk to Rumney Marsh? So in terms of public critical infrastructure, 6 assets came floating to the top. This is including both transportation and building level assets. And we're looking at Revere, Everett, Malden, Saugus, and Lynn around the Rumney, the Saugus and Pines River estuary area. So the most vulnerable area is the Mass Highway DPW yard in Revere. This is based on our consequence scoring and the elevation of that area. It's very low. It's probably one of the lowest areas that is of high criticality. Following that is the MBTA bridge. This is crossing from Saugus to Lynn. Right now it's labeled as Saugus, but the commuter rail in general is at a fairly low elevation. It's built to the present day 100-year flood elevation, or back when it was built to that day's 100-year flood elevation, which is becoming more frequently flooded, and someone sent in a picture during the Christmas floods that showed the water level only a foot and a half below the rail line. And there wasn't even a major storm. That storm kind of came unexpectedly. The next most vulnerable site is the Bridge Street substation in Lynn. Then we are followed by the Linden School in Malden. I believe that's close to Town Line Brook, or is that probably close to Linden Brook, actually. The MBTA bus terminal in Lynn came in at number 5. And then the Lincoln Ave Bridge in Saugus came in at number 6. We have hidden behind this some more of those assets, and you can see there's a big table documenting all of this information. That'll be part of a final report that gets prepared by the end of June. And that list that's not even a full list. The list goes off the page. So there's a lot of analysis in it, and a lot of outcomes that we can take action to address. In terms of transportation infrastructure, the commuter line was the highest risk because it serves the most people, it serves the region, serves greater than the region, and it's at a low elevation. And then all state routes fell in above that. That's because of the consequence of flooding a state route. That doesn't just affect a property, that affects the region. So the lowest and most at-risk area there was Route 1, followed by Route 60, then Route 1A, Route 107, and Route 99. In some cases, these might be ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they might actually have found an equivalent level of risk, and so then we've ordered them based on the projected 100-year flood depth. Now, this is kind of gaming this vulnerability. We don't want to say that one person is less at risk than another, or less important than another person. So I realize that this ranking kind of, it just focuses, we've just got to address that number 1. But in reality, we have many things to address all around the region. Private infrastructure was also included. We didn't go out and survey that specifically because that became just overwhelming, the number of places that we would have to go. But in general, we found that gas and electric utilities from private businesses is the number 1 hazard, followed by hazardous material sites. There are some industries that are located very close to the marsh that, if flooded, might cause environmental spills. Medical services was ranked as number 3. Some ambulance services or residential facilities. And then in addition to medical services, it's important to note that state routes and all of these evacuation routes and ways that ambulances get to people is also threatening medical services. Large residential facilities was number 4, and then pharmacies and grocers were number 5. If you have any questions about this, hopefully we'll have time at the end. We can jump back to these slides, but go ahead.
Number 1 on the list, you said that the guy in transportation was the commuter rail line, line?
Yes.
So that means that if there was a flood, that would be, if that were affected, that would be the most disastrous thing in terms of transportation.
Yes.
Because that could happen.
Yes.
So directly adjacent to that, like immediately adjacent to that, is Resco. You know what Resco is?
As in the wheelabrator.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the name I know it by. Thank you.
100 yards from the rail line
Yes.
is wheelabrator. So if there's a true risk for the transportation to be flooded, the rail line, is there a true risk for wheelabrator to be flooded? And therefore, should we be really looking closely at that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say in general, that kind of wheelabrator falls under that hazardous materials sites vulnerability of private infrastructure. In terms of the elevation of wheelabrator and compared to the commuter line, we didn't go onto the wheelabrator site, and we're not working directly with them. We're looking mostly at municipal infrastructure in this project. So I don't have exact elevations as to when pieces of that site might be at risk. In general, they're building a landfill, and it's actually they're building elevation daily as they bring more material in, and you can see.
Are they building it with polluting ash?
So it's this circle here is out, much of it is outside the 2070 flood projection, but the access ways into Wheelabrator are definitely vulnerable. That's all I really can say right now. And as to should we do a study specifically on that? I'm not sure. I think that's up to, I don't even know if the towns can do that because it's a private facility. Yeah, right. It's a risk. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Good question. So in terms of adapting, we are looking at focusing in on critical infrastructure, but then widening our view back out and to see why is this critical infrastructure specifically vulnerable? And that is as a result of flood pathways. So flood pathways is this kind of lens that we look at flood risk because there are often pinch points, very narrow, low elevation areas that flooding might come up through. Maybe this is a brook, or maybe this is a low point in a roadway. And it can help us address regional risk with a smaller footprint project. So for instance, at the bottom of the page here, we have Revere Street. So flooding over Revere Street, once it's overtopping that area, it spreads out across a low elevation flat area. So if that flooding can be addressed at its source, then it's more easy to manage. Unfortunately, across the whole Saugus River watershed area, there are many flood pathways. They're listed here. There's areas by the Blossom Street waterfront, the Saugus River waterfront by the GE air infrastructure. I'm not sure don't know much about that place, but the GE industry over there in Lynn. Then the Strawberry Brook area in Lynn, Ballard Street to Bristow Street, which I've mentioned before, Townline Brook and Linden Brook, all being vulnerable over Route 1 in Malden and Revere, North Shore Road and Revere Street, and then Point of Pines, Riverside, Revere Beach. So those are kind of the major areas that if we wanted to address flooding at a larger scale, we can start to look at those flood pathways. But that's not to say there isn't general fringe flooding. So there are also areas that are very close to the marsh that are vulnerable, but then quickly go uphill. So maybe the front properties are vulnerable, but the next layer of properties is not. The lens that we're looking at this project is regional adaptation. That is the ultimate goal, is to try to find a solution that benefits as many people at once as possible. There are many ways that we can adapt to flood risk. One is to avoid that flood risk in the first place. So, so regional policy can play a role in keeping new development out of flood zones. That's a way to avoid future flood risk. You can also accommodate the flooding, maintaining your assets where they are, but making it okay for the floodwaters to come in. You can raise buildings, you can make things waterproof, you can move generators from the first floor to the second floor. You can protect yourself. That can be done through nature-based infrastructure or hard infrastructure. This picture here is just a schematic of a seawall, generally showing like the Rice Ave seawall, which can provide protection against a certain level storm. But you can also have dunes. Sand dunes can provide protection at beach areas, or elevated earthen berms, which is a project that's being planned in the Riverside area, can provide that flood protection by building a critical elevation that buffers against the flood. You can also advance against the storm. This is mostly talking about beach nourishment, but there are other types of projects out there where you can, instead of backing away from it, you can aggressively go against the flooding. Advancement is typically hard to permit because there are very sensitive habitats and wetland resources in the areas of these marine habitats that if you're trying to build on them, it's very hard to permit. And then lastly, there's retreat. So any things that are non-essential, assets that are non-essential in the flood zone, maybe there's a better location that they could be placed. Looking at regional adaptation, there's a lot of work going on already. Saugus is doing their own studies of vulnerability assessment. Lynn is looking at Strawberry Brook. Revere is looking to build in Riverside, and where everybody is hoping to address regional flood pathways at the end of the day. We can also look to build regional resilience through addressing assets on a general scale. So looking at low-lying roads could be one way of building regional resilience. Looking at state routes, 5 state routes in this area were all vulnerable to flood risk. So maybe MassDOT could be collaborated with to build up those elevations of the roadways and at least provide evacuation routes during extreme floods. There could be natural resource management because the watershed, crosses many boundaries, but it doesn't work according to the municipal boundaries. Rumney Marsh itself spans Revere to Malden to Saugus to Lynn. But those natural resources all need to be managed in one holistic viewpoint. And then lastly, policy and planning. That can be coordinated on a regional level if towns are able to work together positively. Sure.
The natural resource management, are you saying that's not possible, or that you have to find, someone to put them all in there?
Oh, that is, natural resource management is definitely a goal, definitely a possibility and a goal of regional planning. And there could be co-benefits to natural resource management. Maybe the primary benefit is to the habitat that we all live close to. But you can also build flood protection or flood storage into natural resources. So what I want to do with the next 10, 15 minutes is break out again into adaptation strategy tables. So we have up front here regional flood protection or storm surge barrier discussions. Anyone who wants to talk about maybe the Army Corps study that was done in the 1990s or the Rice Ave seawall or looking for very kind of holistic approaches to flood protection, we can meet at this table. Daria and Mary will be over there. If anybody is particularly interested in emergency response planning, because we don't necessarily, we always, in addition to infrastructure-based flood protection, we also need to be ready for the floods when they come. So that is an important component of this. In the back there is Justine, and she is ready to speak about policy and regulations and how, just prompting discussions about how that can be used to reduce our flood risk. And then Linnea, in that corner, is there to speak with you all about building level improvements. So if you're at your home and you're looking to adapt your own home, we can talk about how that might be done, what options are out there, what people have done in the past, or if there's critical infrastructure or businesses that are at risk, how can they adapt on an individual basis? And then lastly, on the side over here is Lexi, and she's ready to talk about nature-based solutions with you all and get your viewpoints on what you'd like to see in a nature-based solution. Do you like salt marsh habitat, dunes, beaches, open space and public access, et cetera? So, I talked quickly. Come to me if you have any questions, but we're looking for your input again, so just let it all out and let us know what you think. Thank you. this at? Just one. Just one. So maybe give them until 15.
Materials, linen, cotton,
Yeah.
everything's there.
Hey, Joe.
Make sure everybody.
Oh, you gotta mark it on the board. All right, if we can start to return to our seats, please.
When you're done, just have a words to close it out.
Yeah. Do you want me to do the schedule, or do you want to just jump in? Because it's just this.
Go through the timeline and then I'll jump in at the end.
Okay.
That's it.
And then, do we want to offer questions at all, or just we'll hang out? Okay. Questions in the okay. Questions. Okay. I just got one. Thank you very much. All right. Last warning, we will start to collect, and I can discuss schedule, and we'll take questions, and then Elle will wrap us up. All right, thank you so much. This has been really fun. And it seems like everybody's got a lot on their minds, and I really appreciate that. So I'll just end with, if we can thank you for putting that up. This is our project timeline. We kicked off in November, and we went out to each town, and we did our site surveys in December, did our vulnerability assessment over the winter from January through March. Now we are into this regional adaptation planning phase that you are all helping us with, that we will continue into June, and we'll wrap up the project at the end of June, March 30th. And that is the plan for just this project, but there are many other projects going on. There are applications going in for future projects. I'll let Elle speak to those. But right now, I do want to take any questions. If there are any general questions from folks, feel free to raise your hand. Thanks.
Yeah, so June 30th, the project will be decided.
Yes, decided. I mean, the project will be written up into a final report. So yeah, all of the input that we've done, all the analysis will be made into a document that'll be, I think, posted publicly. Don't worry that this isn't like the end of planning of adaptation.
So that was my question, like,
Yes.
if you find it as you're moving forward and you're doing the project and something comes up.
Yeah.
This isn't like,
No, it's not like this is your last chance to get your word in at all. There will, any project going forward will always have community engagement pieces. And, you know, we'll slowly narrow our focus. So right now we're taking a very broad view, and future steps are meant to narrow in our focus and become more and more clear about what we need to do to adapt. Yes.
A website somewhere I can go and find all this information, the timeline, because I can't read what you guys.
Yeah, apologies for that. We will post these slides publicly, I believe, and there's going to be a recording. Is that true? From Revere TV, and I think the landing page for that is Lynn in Common, LYNNINCOMMON.com, LynnInCommon.com. And thank you. What is the website for that? SaugusRiver.org. Thanks, Mary. That's Mary of the Saugus River Watershed Council. All right, any other questions? Or I will pass it to, oh, thank you.
What are we looking at right now, this present day, with regard to building in neighborhoods that aren't prone to flooding? What are we requiring, compensatory storage of water under those buildings? Are there any guidelines set up?
That's a great question. I do not know the zoning bylaws or that might require that kind of thing right now.
Riverside, when they built those houses in the 39 and 40 stuff. I'd say probably 90% of those homes over there, have crawl spaces under them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing because the water's topping over there right now. And, we should be, in my opinion, we should be looking at setting up some guidelines for future building in the city. When I say future, I mean current day.
Yeah, thank you. So the comment there was that we need policy and guidelines for future development to be reducing their risk. And that, I hope you were able to talk with Justine a little bit.
We spoke about that at our table over here, and it's certainly something we're looking to take on in the city of Revere within our zoning ordinance. So thank you, Councilor Powers.
That was Tom from the city of Revere saying that they are looking into those kinds of solutions. Thank you. I think I will stick around. You're welcome to talk to me. I can jump to any table you'd like me to. And I'll pass it back to Elle.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking time out of your evenings to come here and to share your ideas, your thoughts, your concerns. It does guide the process going forward. As Connor mentioned, we are coming to the end of this particular project. It doesn't mean it's the end of planning, but we are submitting a new grant round for the next round of MVP funding in order to fund another year of the team SPRAR, Saugus Pines River Advocates for Regional Resiliency, so that we can all continue to work together and we can all continue to, as Connor mentioned, narrow down what are the options. So we know as a region what the most vulnerable assets are. They've been studied and analysis has been done, so we know sort of what is that tipping point in which the critical infrastructure will be completely inundated. And we can use that data in order to focus on what adaptations can be made to specific sites that may cross municipal boundaries. So that's the whole strategy of actually working as a region as opposed to working as one single community, is that we can provide advocacy for that type of work. And we know that the flood pathways don't necessarily follow municipal boundaries. So it's really important that we can reach outside of that when we need to create flood risk reduction. So I'm going to have one last ask of everyone before you leave. Actually, I have a couple asks. So one, visit Linen Common. So if you've missed any of the previous meetings, you're able to look at the slides from other meetings. Our email addresses are all posted there as well. So if you have other questions or thoughts, or you're not sure about something, feel free to reach out. We want to open the lines of communication. That's why we're here. That's why we're holding public engagement meetings, because we actually do want to hear from you, and that will help guide our path. If you haven't filled out a note card about your experiences with flooding, either driving by flooding, being held up because you can't get to where you're going, you can't get to work, you can't get into your house, you've had damage or repetitive flood damage. So we have tried to track the repetitive flood damage, but it's sort of limited material. It's tracked really only with FEMA flood insurance. So if you have flood insurance outside of there, or you've lived in your home for a long time and you don't have flood insurance, it wouldn't be reported there. So there's sort of it's a little bit of a challenge trying to get that repetitive loss information. So if you have experienced repetitive flood and you have any information about that you want to share with us, we definitely would love to hear that as well. If you haven't noticed, there's a public survey link. So this is like one of those little QR codes that you can actually scan with your phone. So if you haven't completed a survey, I ask you please to do that. You can click on this on your way out the door. You can do it when you get home, or you can find it on our websites as well. So Linen Common, as we said, it's a regional grant, so I know we're in Revere, but we're directing everyone to Linen Common because they're hosting the main page. We put links up too in Revere, but that will have all the data, so you can just go straight there. So as I said, don't be shy about going there. Survey, MVP grant, last ask, promise. On the way out, Mary's holding a form. It's actually a letter. It's a letter of support. If you're in support of the work that we've done and you'd like to see us continue it, we are submitting a grant application, which is due on Thursday, to continue this work as a region. So if you're in support of that, if you don't mind signing on to the letter of support, it really creates, a message that, we're all willing to work together and you're in support of the work that we're doing and you'd like to see it continue. So I'd ask that if you don't mind to sign on to that letter. It's really important. The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness team is excited about community engagement, as are we, which is why we're offering community meetings as well as translation services as requested, so we can keep everybody engaged and give everyone a voice throughout the process. So that's, I think, where we're at. Does anyone have any last questions before we wrap up? Yes, go ahead, please.
I just hope everyone supports this team, because nobody's ever shown up to help us with this. Other than putting your name out there, even criticizing them, I know it's our nature to just take it because we like what we're doing, but I just hope people can see that they're trying to help, and this is a lot to express that. I just want to.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. And again, thanks to all of you for taking time of your night. It's really meaningful, and I know that everyone has busy schedules. And as you ask anybody, I'm kind of a stickler for keeping meetings on track, so I think we're going to get you out of here by 7:30. So everyone enjoy your evening. And as I said, just don't forget to, do those few housekeeping things on your way out the door. Click on the survey, sign the letter, and go to Linen Common at some point when you arrive at home or when you have some extra time. And feel free to give us feedback at any time. So we'll submit the grant application this Thursday, and I don't think we hear back until maybe, I think it's like August or September. Yes, August or September. To see if we've been funded for another round. So we'll wrap up in June. So the final reports will be posted on the Linen Common site as well, so you'll be able to look for those probably early July. We'll have that posted. All right, so that's it. Stay tuned. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.